The massive Zephyrian salvage ship drifted through the dead solar system like a metal whale hunting for scraps. Commander Vexahall stood on the bridge, watching the scanner displays show nothing but floating debris and cold rocks. His green-scaled hands tapped against the command console as he studied the readings. 3 cycles they had been searching this forgotten corner of space and found only worthless metal fragments. The crew was getting restless. Salvage operations were profitable only when they found something valuable, and this system had been picked clean by other crews decades ago. Vexall was about to order the fleet to move to the next system when his sensor operator hissed in excitement. "Commander, we have something large on the deep scanners." Vexall moved to the sensor station and looked at the display. Hidden in an asteroid field was a massive object, easily 2 kilometers long. The shape was wrong for a natural formation, and the metal signature was clearly artificial. His secondary heart began beating faster as he realized what they had found. "Is it a ship?" he asked. The sensor operator worked the controls with 4 arms, pulling up more detailed scans. "Yes, Commander." "Very old design, unknown configuration. The hull shows significant battle damage, but the structure appears intact." Vexahol studied the readings carefully. The vessel was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Its design was crude by current standards, with thick armor plating and what appeared to be kinetic weapon systems. Whoever built this ship came from a species that favored brute force over elegant energy weapons. "Any life signs?" "Negative, Commander. The ship is completely cold. No power signatures, no atmosphere. It has been dead for a very long time." Vexall smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. A derelict vessel of this size would contain vast amounts of valuable materials. Even if the technology was primitive, the sheer quantity of refined metals would make this salvage operation highly profitable. His crew would finally get their bonus payments. Signal the other ships. "We have found our prize." The Zephyrian salvage fleet consisted of 12 vessels of various sizes. The largest ships carried the heavy cutting equipment needed to break apart derelict vessels, while smaller craft served as cargo haulers and security escorts. As the fleet moved toward the asteroid field, Vexahol ordered his teams to begin preliminary scans. The ancient vessel grew larger on the view screen as they approached. Its hull was scarred with what looked like energy weapon burns and impact craters from projectile weapons. Strange markings covered sections of the armor, symbols that looked almost like writing but followed no known linguistic patterns. "Commander, the hull composition is unusual," reported his science officer. "The armor contains elements I do not recognize. Some kind of composite material with embedded crystalline structures." "Valuable?" asked Vexahol. "Potentially very valuable. If we can determine how it was manufactured, this could be worth more than standard salvage rates." The salvage crews attached their ships to the derelict vessel using magnetic clamps and began setting up cutting stations. The hull was incredibly thick, nearly 3 meters of solid armor in some places. Whatever species built this ship expected to fight in serious battles. Vexahol watched his teams work through the external cameras. The cutting torches sent showers of sparks into the vacuum as they slowly burned through the ancient metal. Inside the derelict, automated systems that had slept for centuries began to stir deep within the massive vessel. Quantum processors started their wake-up sequences. The ship's identification systems detected foreign intrusion and began analyzing the alien vessels attached to its hull. Ancient protocols activated, scanning for authorization codes that would never come. The vessel had a name, though the aliens could not read the letters burned into its hull. USS Defiance. It had been humanity's pride, a dreadnought built for war and crewed by the finest officers Earth could produce. Now it drifted in space like a tomb, its crew long dead, but its spirit unbroken not in the ship's central core. Crystalline matrices that stored more than just data began to pulse with faint energy. The Defiance had been equipped with experimental technology, systems that could preserve more than memories and tactical information. Neural patterns of the crew, captured in their final moments, waited in quantum storage for the right conditions to return. The Zephyrian cutting teams made their first breach into the outer hull. Atmosphere that had been trapped for 2 centuries rushed out into space, carrying with it the last breath of humans who had died defending their ship. The aliens paid no attention to the escaping gas, focused only on accessing the valuable materials. Inside, Vexal studied the internal scans as his teams pushed deeper into the vessel. The ship's layout was strange, with corridors wide enough for large beings and rooms that seemed designed for creatures that stood upright on 2 legs. The technology was primitive but robust, built to function even under extreme damage. "Commander, we are detecting some kind of central processing core," reported the scan technician. "Very large, possibly valuable computing systems. Can we extract it intact? Possibly, but we will need to access it carefully. The core appears to be connected to every system on the ship." What the Zephyrians did not understand was that they were not looking at a simple computer core. The massive quantum processing system was more than just technology. It was a digital heaven where the souls of dead humans waited for resurrection. As the alien salvage teams cut deeper into the ship, they triggered proximity sensors that had remained dormant for decades. Security protocols activated, analyzing the intruders and finding no valid authorization. The ship's artificial intelligence began its emergency awakening procedures. Captain Jake Morrison had been dead for 200 years, but death had not claimed his mind. His neural patterns existed within the ship's quantum matrix, waiting for the moment when his vessel would need him again. As alien hands touched human technology, that moment finally arrived. The Defiance began to wake up. Power. Systems that had been cold for centuries started their initialization sequences. Fusion reactors deep in the ship's core flickered to life, sending energy through conduits that had carried no current since the final battle. The ship's sensors came online one by one, giving the awakening consciousness eyes to see the universe. Again, Vexal noticed the power readings, but dismissed them as feedback from his own equipment. The idea that the ancient vessel could still function never crossed his mind. To him, it was just another derelict to be broken apart and sold for scrap. He had no idea that he had just awakened something that would change the balance of power. In the galaxy, the humans were coming back from the dead, and they were not pleased with what had been done to their territory while they slept. The first thing Captain Jake Morrison experienced was not sight or sound, but pure information flowing through his consciousness, like water through a broken dam. Numbers and data streams rushed past his awareness as his mind struggled to understand what was happening to him. He remembered the final battle, remembered ordering his crew to abandon ship, remembered staying behind to buy them time to escape. Then nothing until now. Morrison tried to open his eyes, but realized he had no eyes to open. He tried to move his hands, but discovered he had no hands to move. Panic should have set in, but instead, a strange calm filled his thoughts as understanding dawned. He was not dead, but he was no longer alive in any way that mattered. His consciousness existed now as patterns of energy within the ship's quantum core. Through the Defiance's sensor array, Morrison could see the alien vessels attached to his ship, like parasites feeding on a corpse. Strange creatures and environmental. Suits were cutting through his hull with plasma torches, their 4 arms working efficiently as they carved deeper into the vessel he had commanded in life. Anger burned through his digital existence as he watched them violate his ship. The captain's awareness expanded through the ship's network, following data pathways like corridors in a familiar building. Every system responded to his presence. As if recognizing an old friend, The fusion reactors hummed with increasing power as Morrison's consciousness touched their control systems. Life support systems that had been dormant for centuries began their startup sequences. In the quantum storage matrix, other patterns of light began to stir. Lieutenant Susan Walsh felt herself awakening from a dreamless sleep that had lasted lifetimes. Her memories returned slowly, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. The bridge, the enemy ships closing in, the captain's final order to abandon ship. She had refused to leave, choosing instead to stay and fight beside her commanding. Officer. Engineer Pete Johnson materialized in the ship's virtual environment alongside Walsh and Morrison. His consciousness took the form of a glowing humanoid shape, recognizable but clearly not flesh and blood. Around them, the digital space resembled the bridge of the Defiance, complete in every detail, except for the subtle glow that marked it as artificial. "Captain," Walsh said, her voice carrying clearly through the quantum communication network, "where are we? What happened to us?" Morrison looked at his hands, watching energy patterns flow beneath translucent skin. "We're in the ship's core, Susan. Our neural patterns were stored in the quantum matrix before the final battle. We're not alive anymore, but we're not exactly dead either." More crew members began appearing in the virtual space. Chief Medical Officer Linda Carter, Weapons Officer Danny Brooks, Communications Specialist Amy Richardson. One by one, the officers who had chosen to stay and fight materialized as digital beings within their ship's consciousness. They retained their memories, their personalities, their skills, but they existed now as pure information. Johnson moved to what appeared to be an engineering console, his hands passing through solid matter before the interface adapted to his new nature. "Captain, all primary systems are coming online. The aliens triggered our emergency protocols when they breached the hull. The ship is waking up. Through the external sensors, they could see more alien salvage crews working on their hull." The creatures moved with casual efficiency, clearly believing they were dealing with nothing more than valuable scrap metal. They had no idea that 47 human consciousness patterns were now fully active and very unhappy with the situation. "What are our options?" Morrison asked his crew. The question felt strange coming from a digital being, but command responsibilities transcended physical existence. He was still the captain of this vessel. "Alive or dead." Walsh accessed the tactical systems through her consciousness interface. "Weapons are offline, but coming up to standby status. Shields are charging. Engines are in startup sequence. We have full control over all ship systems, Captain. They don't know we're active," observed Carter, studying the alien movements through medical scanners, repurposed as surveillance equipment. "Their biology is interesting. 4 arms, redundant circulatory systems, probably from a high-gravity world." Morrison made his decision with the same certainty he had shown in life. These aliens were trespassing on human territory, attacking a human vessel, and treating the remains of his crew with disrespect. The fact that he and his officers were technically dead did not change their duty to defend Earth's interests. "Johnson, I want full power to all systems. Weapons hot, shields at maximum. Walsh, prepare to target their ships. We're going to send a message that will reach every corner of the galaxy." The USS Defiance began to truly wake up. Deep in its armored hull, railguns the size of city blocks started their charging cycles. Fusion reactors that had been cold for 2 centuries ignited with the fury of captive stars, sending massive amounts of power through the ship's systems. The vessel's advanced shielding flickered to life, creating an energy barrier that could stop any weapon known to galactic civilization. "Commander." Vexhall noticed the power readings on his scanners, but interpreted them as interference from his own equipment. The possibility that a 200-year-old derelict could still function was beyond his understanding. His crews continued their work, cutting deeper into the human vessel, while the digital ghosts of its crew prepared for battle. In the virtual bridge, Morrison stood before his officers like a general addressing his troops. They were no longer human in the traditional sense, but they retained everything that had made them effective warriors. Their knowledge, their training, their determination to protect humanity's legacy had survived the transition from flesh to energy. "We are the last representatives of the human species in this sector," Morrison told his crew. "These aliens think we are extinct, that our ships are nothing but salvage to be picked apart and sold. They are about to learn that humanity does not die easily." The Defiance's engines came online with a rumble that shook the asteroid field. The massive dreadnought, scarred by battle but still magnificent, began to move under its own power for the first time in centuries. Its digital crew stood ready at their stations, prepared to fight a war that should have ended with their deaths. Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien vessels, BROADCASTING, on standard galactic frequencies. His message was simple and direct: identify yourselves and explain your actions, or face the consequences. The aliens, however, had never encountered human technology and dismissed the transmission as random interference. The ghosts of humanity's finest warriors prepared to remind the galaxy why humans had once been feared across the stars. Commander Vexahol felt the vibration through his ship's hull as the massive derelict began generating power. His instruments showed energy readings that should have been impossible from a vessel that had been dead for centuries. Warning lights flashed across his command console as the ancient ship's fusion reactors reached full operational status. "Commander, the derelict is showing massive power spikes," his sensor operator reported with growing concern. "Energy output is climbing beyond our measurement capabilities." Vexahol studied the readings with confusion rather than alarm. In his experience, old ships sometimes had automated systems that activated when disturbed. Usually these systems burned out quickly or could be easily overridden. He had never encountered a vessel with technology sophisticated enough to present a real threat. "Probably just backup power systems responding to our salvage operations," he decided. "Continue cutting operations, but monitor the energy levels. If they become dangerous, we can always disconnect and wait for the systems to exhaust their power reserves." What Vexahol did not understand was that the USS Defiance was not running on backup power. The ship's fusion reactors were operating at full capacity, providing energy to weapon systems that had been designed to fight entire enemy fleets. The human dreadnought was preparing for battle, while the aliens treated it like a malfunctioning piece of equipment. On the virtual bridge of the Defiance, Captain Morrison watched the alien commander through intercepted communications. The creature's dismissive attitude toward human technology filled Morrison with cold fury. These beings had invaded human space, carved up human territory, and now they were treating his ship like garbage to be processed for scrap metal. "Captain, I'm detecting 12 alien vessels in total," reported Lieutenant Walsh from her tactical station. 8 heavy salvage ships, 4 escort fighters. Their weapons are standard galactic energy systems. Shields are particle-based. Nothing we haven't dealt with before. Morrison nodded, though the gesture was purely habitual in his digital form. "Communications, open a channel to the alien commander. All frequencies, maximum power. Make sure they can hear us." Amy Richardson activated the ship's communication array, sending Morrison's message across every frequency used by galactic civilization. The transmission was clear and unmistakable, broadcast with enough power to be heard across the entire star system. "Attention alien vessels. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force warship USS Defiance. You are trespassing in human space and conducting unauthorized salvage operations on a military vessel. Identify yourselves immediately and explain your presence here. The message reached every ship in the Zephyrian fleet, but the aliens had never encountered human language or communication protocols. Their translation systems, designed for known galactic species, could not process the unfamiliar syntax and acoustic patterns. To them, Morrison's warning sounded like random electromagnetic interference. Vexhall dismissed the transmission without a second thought. Increased jamming on all frequencies. The derelict's automated systems are generating interference with our communications. I want clean channels for coordination between our ships. Morrison waited 60 seconds for a response, then tried again with a more direct approach. This time he transmitted mathematical sequences and star charts, universal. Concepts that any spacefaring species should recognize. The message included the coordinates of Earth and other human worlds, clearly identifying the territory that belonged to humanity. Again, the aliens ignored the transmission. Their jamming systems actively blocked Morrison's attempts at communication, treating his messages as unwanted noise to be filtered out. The alien salvage crews continued their work, cutting deeper into the Defiance's hull with plasma torches and industrial cutters. "They're not responding to our communications," Richardson reported. "They're actively jamming our transmissions and continuing their salvage operations." Morrison felt something that might have been a heartbeat if he still had a heart. These aliens were not just trespassing. They were deliberately ignoring his attempts at peaceful contact. In military terms, they had committed an act of war against a human vessel and were refusing to acknowledge any authority except their own. "Captain, they're cutting into Section 7, Johnson reported from his engineering station. "That's where we stored the crew quarters and personal effects of the men and women who died in the final battle. They're desecrating our ship, the Digital." Ghost of Linda Carter spoke up from her medical station. "Jake, they don't know what they're doing. From their perspective, we're just another derelict to be salvaged. Maybe we should try a different approach." Morrison appreciated Carter's attempt at diplomacy, but his patience had reached its limit. He had tried peaceful contact twice and been ignored both times. The aliens were cutting into his ship, destroying the resting place of his crew, and treating human space like their personal salvage yard. "Susan, bring weapons online. All systems full power. We're going to give them one more chance to respond, and then we're going to remind them why humans were once respected in this galaxy." The USS Defiance's weapon systems came to life with mechanical precision that would have been beautiful if it were not so terrifying. Railguns that could punch through planetary armor began their targeting sequences. Missile tubes loaded with fusion warheads prepared for launch. Energy weapons that had been dormant for centuries hummed with deadly power. Walsh reported from tactical with the satisfaction of a professional warrior. "All weapons online and ready, Captain. I have targeting solutions on all enemy vessels. Their shields won't stop our kinetic weapons, and their armor is too light to withstand our firepower." Morrison opened the communication channel one final time. His message was simple and direct, transmitted with enough power to burn through any jamming system the aliens might have. "This is your final warning. Cease salvage operations immediately and withdraw from this system. Any further hostile action will be met with lethal force." Vexhall heard the transmission this time, but his translation systems still could not process the human language. The message came through as aggressive-sounding noise, which he interpreted as malfunctioning equipment rather than a threat from living beings. He made a decision that would cost him his fleet and his life. The derelict systems are becoming unstable. All ships maintain current operations, but be prepared to disconnect quickly if necessary. We're too close to completing this salvage. To abort now. Morrison watched the alien commander give orders to continue the attack on his ship. The decision had been made for him. These beings had chosen to treat human territory as their own, human ships as salvage, and human warnings as noise to be ignored. All stations, "This is the captain," Morrison announced to his digital crew. "We are at war." The first Zephyrian salvage ship died so quickly that its crew never realized they were under attack. One moment the vessel was attached to the USS Defiance's hull, cutting through armor plating with industrial plasma torches. The next moment, it simply ceased to exist, torn apart by a railgun projectile, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Commander Vexhall watched in horror as his most experienced salvage crew vanished in a burst of expanding debris and superheated gas. The projectile had struck with such tremendous force that it had vaporized not just the ship, but everything within 100 meters of the impact point. Chunks of twisted metal spun away into space, glowing white-hot from the kinetic energy transfer. "All ships emergency disconnect," Vexhall screamed into his communicator. "The derelict is armed and active. Repeat, the target is hostile." On the virtual bridge of the Defiance, Lieutenant Susan Walsh smiled with grim satisfaction as she watched the alien vessel disintegrate. Her targeting had been perfect, placing the railgun round precisely where it would cause maximum damage while avoiding the risk of hitting other alien ships. She was sending a message that human weapons were accurate as well as deadly. "Direct hit, Captain," Walsh reported. "Enemy vessel destroyed. Remaining ships are attempting to disengage." Captain Morrison studied the tactical display through his digital consciousness. The aliens were moving in predictable patterns, following standard salvage fleet protocols that prioritized expensive equipment over tactical flexibility. Their ships were designed for industrial work, not combat, and their crews were clearly unprepared for battle against military opponents. Johnson. Analysis of their propulsion systems. Morrison ordered his chief engineer. Pete Johnson accessed the ship's sensor data, his consciousness interfacing directly with the scanning equipment. "Captain, they're using standard galactic drive technology. Hyperspace engines require approximately 30 seconds to charge for jump. Sublight drives are adequate, but not exceptional. They're sitting ducks until they can escape to hyperspace." Morrison felt the familiar calm that came over him during combat situations. These aliens had dismissed his warnings, ignored his attempts at communication, and continued their assault on his ship even after he had demonstrated his ability to defend himself. Now they would learn the price of underestimating human military capabilities. All weapons, free fire. Target the largest ships first. Work your way down. No survivors. The USS Defiance opened fire with the concentrated fury of humanity's most advanced weapons technology. Railguns sent projectiles screaming across space at velocities that made evasion impossible. Fusion missiles streaked toward their targets, their warheads capable of cracking the hull of any known starship. Energy weapons painted deadly beams across the void, slicing through alien armor like hot knives through butter. The Zephyrian fleet tried desperately to escape, but their industrial vessels were no match for a warship designed to fight entire enemy fleets. The second salvage ship exploded as 3 railgun rounds struck it simultaneously, the impacts tearing the vessel apart from bow to stern. Its cargo of refined metals scattered across space like metallic snow. Vexhal's flagship was the largest and most heavily armored vessel in the fleet, but its defenses had been designed to protect against industrial accidents, not military weapons. The ship's particle shields flared and collapsed as human energy weapons overloaded them with raw power. Secondary explosions rippled along the hull as vital systems failed under the devastating assault. "Hyperspace engines are charging. Vexhal has," Navigator reported. 20 seconds to jump capability. 20 seconds might as well have been 20 hours. The USS Defiance moved through space with impossible grace, its advanced gravitic drives allowing the massive dreadnought to maneuver like a fighter craft while maintaining the firepower of a battle station. Morrison's tactical knowledge, combined with the ship's enhanced artificial intelligence, made the vessel a predator among helpless prey. A Zephyrian escort fighter tried to protect one of the fleeing salvage ships by placing itself between the human dreadnought and its target. The gesture was brave but futile. Walsh adjusted her targeting and fired a single railgun round that punched through both ships, destroying the escort and crippling the vessel it had tried to save. "Captain, their communications are interesting," reported Amy Richardson from her station. "They're broadcasting distress calls on all frequencies, asking for military assistance. Apparently they've realized this isn't a simple salvage operation." Morrison studied the alien communication patterns through the ship's analysis systems. The creatures were speaking in multiple languages, trying to reach anyone who might be able to help them. Their messages contained detailed descriptions of human weapons technology and urgent warnings about the revival of what they called the extinct species. "Let them broadcast," Morrison decided. "I want the entire galaxy to know that humanity has returned. Let every species that carved up our territory understand what they're dealing with." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. One by one, Zephyrian vessels fell to the overwhelming firepower of the human dreadnought. Their energy weapons barely scratched the Defiance's adaptive armor, while return fire from the human ship turned their vessels into expanding clouds of superheated debris. Only Commander Vexhal's flagship remained, its hyperspace engines finally reaching full charge. The alien commander stood on his bridge, watching his fleet die around him, knowing that he was about to become the sole survivor of humanity's return to the galaxy. His hands shook as he prepared to give the jump order. "Wait," Morrison said to his crew. "Let him go." Walsh looked at our captain with surprise. "Sir, we have a clean shot." "He won't escape." Morrison watched the alien commander through the ship's sensors, seeing the fear and confusion in the creature's posture. Vexhal had learned the most important lesson of the day. Humanity was not extinct, and human ships were not defenseless salvage to be picked apart at leisure. Now he would carry that message to the rest of the galaxy. "I want him to tell everyone what happened here," Morrison explained. "I want every alien species that thinks they own human space to know that we're coming home." The Zephyrian flagship vanished into hyperspace, carrying with it the news that would reshape galactic politics. Commander Vexhal would spend the rest of his life telling anyone who would listen about the day he woke up the ghosts of humanity's war fleet. Morrison turned his attention to the ship's long-range communication systems. It was time to send a message that would reach every corner of human space, a signal that would wake up the other derelict warships floating in the void. The dead were calling to the dead, and soon the galaxy would remember why humans had once been the most feared warriors among the stars. Commander Vexahol burst from hyperspace into the Galactic Trade Station orbiting Nexus Prime, his ship trailing atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches. His crew was dead, his fleet was destroyed, and his mind was filled with images of weapons that should not have existed. The station's traffic controllers immediately flagged his vessel as an emergency case and guided him to the nearest docking bay. Within hours, Vexhal's report was spreading through the galactic communication networks like wildfire. The various alien species that had carved up human space during humanity's absence found themselves reading detailed accounts of weapons technology that made their own military hardware look like children's toys. Most dismissed the report as the ravings of a traumatized salvage captain, but a few military analysts began pulling up old files about the extinct human species. Captain Jake Morrison did not wait for the galaxy to debate the truth of HFY Story. The USS Defiance was already moving toward the next system on his star charts, its long-range sensors scanning for other derelict human warships. The ship's quantum communication array broadcast activation codes on frequencies that only human military vessels would recognize. "Captain, we're receiving a response from the Kepler system," reported Amy Richardson from her communication station. It's faint, but the signal pattern matches our recognition protocols. Morrison felt something that might have been excitement if he still had a biological nervous system. The Kepler system had been one of humanity's major naval bases before the final war. If ships had survived there, they would be among the most powerful vessels in the human fleet. Set course for Kepler. Maximum speed, the USS Defiance's engines roared to life, pushing the massive dreadnought through space at velocities that few ships could match. As they traveled, Morrison used the ship's communication systems to broadcast a message that would reach every inhabited world within 1,000 light-years. His voice carried across the void with the authority of a species that refused to be forgotten. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force vessel USS Defiance. For 2 centuries, you have occupied human space, plundered human worlds, and treated our legacy as salvage to be picked over. You have built your civilizations on the graves of our people and convinced yourselves that humanity was nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. This ends now. The message reached alien worlds where human cities had been torn down and replaced with structures suited to different species. It broadcast across star systems where human orbital stations had been converted into alien trade posts. On every world that had once been home to human colonists, the dead were speaking from beyond the grave. Morrison continued his broadcast while the Defiance raced toward Kepler system. We are not extinct. We are not defeated. We are the digitized consciousness of humanity's finest warriors, preserved within our warships and waiting for the day when we could reclaim what was taken from us. That day has arrived. The USS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Kepler system to find exactly what Morrison had hoped for. Floating in the debris field of an ancient battlefield was another human dreadnought, the USS Vengeance. The ship was even larger than the Defiance, its hull scarred by battle damage, but its structure intact. Morrison transmitted the activation codes directly to the Vengeance's quantum core. Deep within the derelict vessel, fusion reactors that had been cold for centuries began their startup sequences. The ship's lights flickered to life as its digital crew awakened from their long sleep. Captain Maria Santos had been Morrison's closest friend and fiercest rival during their academy days. Her consciousness materialized in the Vengeance's virtual bridge, immediately accessing the ship's systems and bringing weapons online. Like Morrison, she existed now as patterns of energy within her vessel's quantum matrix. But her determination to protect humanity remained unchanged. "Jake, you magnificent ghost," Santos transmitted to the Defiance. "I was wondering when someone would finally wake us up. What's our tactical situation?" Morrison shared his sensor data with the Vengeance, showing Santos the current state of human space. Alien species had divided their former territory among themselves, treating human worlds like vacant real estate to be claimed and developed. The orbital shipyards where human vessels had been built were now manufacturing facilities for alien corporations. "Maria, how many ships do you think are still out there?" Morrison asked his old friend. Santos accessed the Vengeance's database, cross-referencing fleet deployment records with star charts. "At least 40 major warships, maybe more. The brass scattered the fleet pretty widely during the final campaign. If even half of them are recoverable, we'll have enough firepower to take back our entire territory." The 2 captains began coordinating their efforts, using their ship's quantum communication arrays to broadcast activation codes across human space. One by one, other vessels began responding. The USS Liberty awakened in the Ross system, its crew of digital marines ready for planetary assault operations. The USS Thunder came online near Wolf 359, its massive railguns already targeting alien installations on the former human colony world. Morrison expanded his broadcast to include a final ultimatum to the alien species occupying human territory. You have 72 standard hours to evacuate all human worlds and remove your installations from our space. Any alien presence remaining after that deadline will be considered an act of war against the human species. We have returned from the dead ones. Do not test our ability to do so again. The message reached the capitals of a dozen alien civilizations, causing panic in government halls and emergency sessions in military command centers. Species that had thought themselves safe in their conquered territories suddenly found themselves facing the prospect of war against enemies who had already died once and seemed impossible to kill permanently. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Morrison stood among his digital crew and watched as more ships came online across the galaxy. Each vessel carried the consciousness of human warriors who had refused to let their species fade into extinction. They had been dismissed as relics, written off as ancient history, but now they were returning with a vengeance that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. The alien species who had carved up human space were about to learn that some things were more dangerous than death itself. Humanity had returned, not as flesh and blood, but as something far more terrifying, the undying spirits of warriors who would never surrender their duty to protect their species and reclaim their rightful place in the galaxy. The age of human expansion was beginning again, led by the digital ghosts of those who had died defending their people and now lived only to see them rise once more.